Why Europe fails? That's the question, that's the new book. I'm joined today by MEP Ramon Tremosa and Aleix Sarri, who is the co-authors of this new book. They talk a lot at the beginning about Catalonia. We're not doing Catalonia today, guys. We're going to do the big reasons of this book. Why did you write this book and why did you call it Why Europe Fails? Ramon.
Well, after 8 years in this house, working with Aleix in the Econ Committee, we have seen so many things. And when we have the Brexit vote, in which 18 million of British citizens vote to leave the Union, it is because so many things, so many times are doing wrong from Brussels also.
But is Europe really failing, or is this just a series of problems that need solved?
To say in 30 seconds, the EU has a problem with the implementation of EU law. So many member states do not implement what policymakers vote in this house, and this is a huge problem. This is the cancer of the European Union.
So the failure of implementation?
Yes, every year the European Commission has to open 1,000 infringement procedures against member states, with Spain at the top of the list, because they do not transpose or they do not apply EU legislation. This is breaking the Union.
Alex, Germany is one of your role models in this, is how things should be done. 16 Denmarks in one state. Is this what you see as the future of Europe?
I think it's the only possible future for Europe, because in a globalized world, centralization of political power brings to centralization of taxes, centralization of universities, centralization of the banking system, of infrastructures, and in the end, we have the situation like we are seeing now in France and other countries, where there is a economic and demographic depopulation of the countries that is fueling populism, and populism is probably the worst threat for Europe.
But you talk about France in the book, about this as well, and the rise of populism in France. Is it really a problem of centralization, or is it a problem of globalization? When you look at Germany, as you were asking before, you see that every lander has its own infrastructures that are thought for the people that live there, for their commercial links, that have their own financial system, that have their own universities, that have their own enterprises, their own tax system, and this allows people not to leave their homes, and this allows people to have their own jobs and not to have to live for the capital. And this is a big difference between Germany and France, and this is why our thesis in the book is that for Europe to have future, you either have either small states that are able to adapt themselves to globalization, or big, very federalized states, because centralization plus globalization brings to ruin. Ramon, you're an economist. What do you see as the solution to fixing Europe as an ATM, the big states bailing out smaller states? How do you rebalance?
Well, so many times the countries in the south of Europe give the impression that they are only interested in EU money and not interested to implement the best practices that the Nordic countries offers. So this is why I see so many MEPs from all political families, from so many Nordic countries, that are becoming more and more Eurosceptics when they see the countries in the south of Europe only interested in the money that they can pick up from Brussels, but not to implement the best practices. For instance, the late payments regulation. How can Europe have any kind of convergence if bills are paid in 20, 30 days in the north of Europe and are paid in 300 days in the south of Europe? This is killing
so how do you fix that? How do you compel that change?
Yes. Mario Draghi recognized recently in the Econ Committee that these multinationals or governments paying bills to SMEs to 300 days out of the EU law are killing so many thousands of solvent SMEs and generating this huge amount of unemployment that we see. So we cannot see any convergence in Europe in countries which have a 4% unemployment rate and countries which have 25% unemployment rate. Please, before of thinking about more European progress and constructions,
fix what's there.
Yes, this is the way.
Yeah, basically, when you look at the European semester or this kind of reports, you have the feeling that the best structural reform that we could do is just applying Euro law. Just applying what we already have and applying it in a uniform way. But we see it not only in economic terms, we see it also with the refugees. We have seen the same problem. We're seeing also with the values problem that Europe has and so many years ago. No, we saw it first in Hungary, then in Poland, now we're seeing things in Spain, but it's structural. when you look at it, it's the inability of Europe to defend its own rules and values. And this is becoming...
Why is it failing to defend its rules and values? Surely the Commission is able to implement SME best practice in the south of Europe.
It doesn't have real power to confront member states. When the day comes, the European Commission is not yet elected directly by the citizens, so it doesn't have real power to confront governments that are really elected, so have millions of votes in the ballot boxes for them, and have the credibility to do it. So the problem we have today is that Juncker and the Commission is not able to confront its own members.
To sanction countries, for instance.
Yeah, but you may not have taxation, but you do have the leverage of cohesion funds, for example, as well. How can the Commission, with the existing rules, compel member states to enforce these regulations?
Well, one possibility should be to suspend EU funds, but it has not happened yet. So if it's only a
Are we moving
possibility,
towards that era?
well, yes, but I have heard so many officials of the Commission in this House saying, oh, a solution could be stopping EU funding to the countries that do not apply this, but it has never happened. So in some capitals they realize that it is only a nominal and theoretical threat, not a fact, a possibility.
We saw it with the deficit rule. You remember 2 years ago when there was polemics on Spain and Portugal, if they should sanction them or not, and then someone asked, and why are you not sanctioning France? And then Juncker said, oh, because it's France. But this sentence is perfect to understand what's the real flaw of Europe today.
So is this a leadership crisis?
Yes, because there is a lack of democratic legitimacy. At least Obama or Donald Trump, they have been voted by millions of Americans, so they can go to any state and they can send, you are not doing this in a correct way, and they have real power to implement policies. It is not the case of the European Union.
But in one sense, the leader of your group here, Guy Verhofstadt, argues for more Europe. It's pretty much the remedy for everything.
Well, it's probably the utopic path of Mr. Verhofstadt, who is a way to escape from the lack of implementation of EU law and the local problems it has.
The systemic risks that we face in confronting populism, Alex, what would you do next? What should Europe's next move be to stem the rise of populism?
First thing, to do a democratic reform of the Union. But second thing, and more important, to begin to tackle the problems that we have inside member states that are structural and linked to who has the real power. Because when you have a power, concentration of banking power, where many regions lose their banking branches, when they don't have jobs, when people have to leave, when they don't have opportunities, who is going to invest there? You can do whatever labor reforms do you want, but no one is going to invest there, no one is going to stay there. So Europe first should be more realistic about its own flaws and not be, so politically correct sometimes.
Do you think this feeds into the narrative that Europe is just a club for the rich?
I wouldn't say so.
I think that Europe, for the moment, after Brexit, risks to become the club of three countries and three capitals, which are Rome, Paris, and Madrid. There is a demographic majority in these three big member states, so it would be much more difficult in the future for Sweden or Denmark or Netherlands to win votes in the Council and in the Parliament. So if these three capitals impose their vision on trade, on financial markets, on business regulation, on bureaucracy, more and more people from the Nordic countries will have incentives to leave this union.
Okay. You argue in the book about the need for regional autonomy in terms of tax raising capacity, the German model. Is this a solution for the Spanish Catalan crisis, that Spain gives more autonomy for tax raising powers and the problem goes away?
Well, some years ago, it would have been a solution because all the polls and the preferences for political of Catalan voters was in that way, to have the same autonomy that a German lender or the Basque country in Spain, that full collection of taxes and full control of financial resources and institutions in the region, and of course full control of transport, airports, ports and trains. No? But as Spain, preferences of people is against this model and they want to recentralize powers.
Which is the opposite of what seems to work.
Which is the opposite. This is why there is more and more divergence between preferences in Catalonia and in the rest of Spain.
So you think a more German model would work in Spain in principle?
It could have been a solution in the past, but it is up for the Spanish politicians to put on the table that offer, not in our side.
Alex, let me just ask you on why Catalonia is such a successful economy. What's made it different?
Many reasons, historical reasons mainly, and also its localization for sure, and many governments that have been always export-oriented. Catalonia right now is the most export-oriented region in Spain, with 27% of the total, with only 16% of the population. It has more than 6,000 multinationals, and it has a vibrant economy where investment is every year in record highs. But I wanted to say something on what you asked, Ramon. I think Catalonia what needs is a door. We need a door. We need to be able to go out in case that Spain doesn't revoke the deal, because we have seen that we had autonomy in Catalonia, but it was revoked by a decision from the central government. So there are no real powers that Catalonia can have without the possibility of exercising the right to self-determination, because the right of self-determination is what forces also Madrid to be more caring, if you want to say it that way, or more delicate, or being closer to the will of the Catalan people. So this is really important, because any offer that comes from Madrid that can be revoked the day after or the year after, it's not a good offer.
Okay, let's just finish on a few action points. You have the year of President Juncker. What do you tell him? What needs fixed now? 3 things, Ramon.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
You have the year of President Juncker. What 3 things would you say to him, fix these now and we move forward quickly?
No, the implementation of EU law, the democratic principles to be applied in all Europe, and if there is a majority in Catalonia for independence, it has to be respected. He sometimes has said so, but it is not one-day declaration.
It's a matter of consistency.
Yes, it has to be implemented at the end, and to share best practices all over the continent.
Alex, what would you add to that?
I would say that Juncker just has to follow the fundamental principles of the EU. The principle that says that everything can be dealt through the ballot box. And so I think that would be my main point. He and his commission have been justifying violence lately in Spain. I think that goes against European values. I think that what's happening in Catalonia, it's more harming to the European Union than what's happening with Brexit, the way that Spain is dealing with it. And I think that Juncker should be able to stand up and to say stop and to say, please, all member states should respect European values and
Donald
democracy.
Tusk has been saying.
Okay, so the way forward for Europe is not more Europe, but
better Europe.
Better Europe.
Do what's on the table already. Ramon Tremosa, Aleix Sarri, thank you very much for joining us today. If you haven't bought your Christmas presents yet, buy it now. I'm Brian Maguire.